Welcome viewers to this set of lectures on history writing, or you can say historiography of early India or historiography in early India. This is because as we discussed in the earlier part of this lecture, that there can be two tangents to history writing so far as early India is concerned. One is the modern way in which say the Orientalists wrote about it, or the Indologists wrote about India's past, or the nationalist historians wrote about, or Marxist historians wrote about, or in the recent times postmodernist shade that we get to see in the treatment of ancient India by historians. So, that is one part which we already discussed in the first part of this lecture. The other tangent of historiography about early India or historiography in early India is the way it was practiced in early India, the way people reckoned with their past in early India, and what are the ways and means by which they did so. So, talking about history writing as it was practiced in early India, we get to see, as you can see on your slide, there are royal genealogies and Raj Vanshanucharitam. So, that is something that you will find Purana, the iconic 18 Purana, or even the Sab Purana. So, they are replete with royal genealogies. Puranas are replete with royal genealogy. When the British administrative historians in the 18th and 19th century started reading about India's past, to begin with, they did not look at the Puranas. That is why they went on talking about lack of historical consciousness in early India. Had they probably seen right in the beginning the royal genealogies in Puranas, perhaps they would have moderated this viewpoint that they show unabashedly talked about ancient India. Nevertheless, that is one, royal genealogies that we get to see in Puranas. So, that is symptomatic of awareness about past, because something is handed down, royal genealogies are handed down to the people at large, and that clearly demonstrates the historical consciousness, that they care to record their past and so forth. Now, we will come to the fictitious part of this detailing, but then that also is with an intent, and that is something that we keep doing with history even today. So, we tend to present our past in ways that suits the present, and that somehow justifies or legitimizes whatever we do in present. So, that is something that we keep doing even today. However, we have a text which is a cut above the rest in terms of the sophistication with which things were recorded about past, and some kind of a critical recording of past. For example, Raj Tarangani by Kalhan quite critically represents the past of Kashmir, and it's not a very unquestioned eulogical kind of reconstruction of past, the way royal genealogies in Puranas appear. So, Kalhan, you can say, or Raj Tarangani by Kalhan is quite close to the way we go about recording past in chronological manner even today. However, the panegyric accounts of the rulers, which we understand as Charita literature, or the other variant is the regional chronicles, that again comes to us in good number. The detailed dynastic genealogies found on copperplate charters as part of land grants or even otherwise, they are all found interspersed with legendary stories. So, initially when the British administrative historians laid their hands on to such things, since there were legendary stories also woven into mythological figures and etc., so they brushed it aside, which today historians are looking at with a fair degree of sensitivity now, and they are not brushing everything aside as a historical or fantasy. Because it does carry historical sensibilities in their own ways, and certainly does not deserve the labeling that ancient India did not have historical consciousness at all. Now, the problem in these texts is that there is abundance of poetic literature, and it is laden with myths and elaborate metaphors, and also some kind of an unreal genealogical presentation. So, this trend or this fashion or this particular way in which genealogies were recorded in Puranas or copper plate charters, etc., the vocabulary in which it came to us, poetic metaphors, etc., myths interspersed with some facts, and at times superhuman figures as part of the narrative. So, obviously, these or such kind of text were seen as ahistorical by 19th century European scholars. However, in the middle of that, for example, the Mahavans, and that we got from Sri Lanka, the trustworthiness of Mahavans is upheld, and I have given you the details on the slide which you can make use of. So is the case with some of the Puranic genealogies with respect to the date of Buddha. So, there were scholars who were little more sensitive to the way ancient Indians presented historical sensibilities or historical consciousness, although they came interspersed with religious idioms or mythological figures and so forth. Largely what we get to see is some kind of a polarity of opinions. I have quoted the German Indologist H. Burchart's remark that the Indian historiography has remained the stepchild of Indology and a problem child for the historians. So, it's a witty remark, but very tight remark as well, because the Indologists did not treat ancient India's history or records of ancient India as their own child, and so there is a step motherly treatment by the Indologists, because it was not fitting into, or it was not making a neat fit into the post Enlightenment conceptualization of a chronological event oriented past with some rational explanation of events and so forth. So, there is that stepmotherly treatment of ancient India's past by the Indologists, and they are not very kind to the language in which, or the form in which historical sensibilities are coming across to them. They are brushing it aside as ahistorical. But even for historians now, with sensitivity, with finesse, if you look at the records that are there about India's past, of course, there are problems. There is the problem of absence of chronology, and there is some major preoccupation with philosophy, metaphysics, and so forth. So, that's there, all right, but it's not exclusive to India's past. I mean, even if you look at the European ancient literature, or the Christian texts through which they got to know about it, or epics like Homer, etc., their works through which they got to know about their own past, they had problems too. and they also came ensconced in several supernatural presentations and fantasies and so forth. So, that is one. Now, I have quoted several others also, for example, Warder, who says that India produced a historical tradition which was quite comparable to the West, but which was systematically denied by the West imperial historiography. Now, this is something that I emphasized in earlier part of the lecture, that it was part of the strategy of the British administration to present India's past in a way that justifies or legitimizes their own existence in India as administrators, because they had to convince the native population that their presence is very much required should they wish for any dynamism in their life, scientificity in their life, progress in their life, because the Orient is stale, unchanging, authoritative from above. It is despotic, as they called it. So, in case they wanted to be more democratic, more modern, more progressive, more dynamic, progress oriented, and so forth, then their stay is very much required. So, this is the strategy with which they are presenting India's past, and therefore, despite some of the ancient Indian texts having fair degree of historical sensibility or historical data or historical consciousness, there is some kind of a summary rejection of them all by the British administrative historians, because it is, after all, an imperial strategy. It is the colonial context in which these texts are being studied. Now, in the 19th century, it was considered entirely acceptable to roundly deny Indians a historical consciousness, and this comes from the likes of Figal and Fleet. This is something that we did speak of in the first part of the lecture as well, that 19th century intellectual ambience was such where science had a lot of prestige, progress had lost of a lot of prestige. The religion, the knowledge emanating from religious sources, even in the West, coming from church, etc. For example, church said that earth is not more than 2000 years old than the birth of Christ, or so that way, or 4000 years before the birth of Christ. So, that way, if we are sitting in the 21st century, the origin of earth cannot be taken beyond 4000 years and so forth. So, these are the things coming from Christian church in the West. But in the 19th century Europe, we also have Darwin, we also have geologists, we also have so many other intellectuals who are, through their scientific discoveries and inventions and assertions and reasoning, they are establishing rather firmly that Earth's origin is very, very anterior to what the church had said. So, even they are undergoing this kind of a churn, this kind of a change. But so far as the colonial context of India is concerned, obviously ancient Indians are being denied this agency of being a historical player and being aware of history and historical consciousness and so forth. So, this is how the narrative went so far as imperial narrative is concerned. Obviously, the reasons cited for this kind of ahistorical orientation of Indians were extra mundane and transcendental character of Indian philosophy, the cyclic worldview, that while the Christian worldview is linear, Christian notion of time is linear, that if something it begins from somewhere and it does not go back to the same place, rather there is a linearity. So, there is a progressive change that happens, and the history does not repeat itself, kind of a assertion. Whereas Indian or Hindu notion of time, we all know that several texts keep reiterating at a very broad level the cyclic nature of time, and even the world view, that it all begins from Satyog, then goes to Treta Yuga, then Dwapar Yuga, then presently Kali Yuga, and again it will go back to Satyog. Although that instance has never come, but this is the orientation, this is the I would say world view with which so many texts do operate. So, that's there, but as we will see that the Indian response, which came from Indian historians, has critiqued this way of presenting India's past, and even the cyclic world view had lot of spaces, lot of tangents which are linear in character, and several texts, and it was to the misfortune of the British that they did not look at those texts or those inscriptions. For example, Ashokan inscription, where he mentions that in this particular year of his reign he is undertaking the Kalinga campaign, or the Rudradaman's rock edict, where he acknowledges that the Tadag, or the lake that he had repaired, was repaired earlier, built by someone in the Mauryan period, was earlier repaired by someone as well. And so there are very real, mundane, administrative histories that are being mentioned in these inscriptions, but it was to the misfortune of the British that they did not care to look at all these things, and just went about making this assertion that ancient India lacked historical consciousness. So, that's why I refer to that statement, where there is some kind of a stepmotherly treatment to India's past, etc. So, also the cyclic worldview, beside the knowledge about its eschatological irrelevance and perpetual return, allowed the interest in historical events and developments to be squandered. This is Harman Kulke writing, beautifully written, because time and again it is being emphasized in Oriental writings that Indians or Hindus are of this worldview, where they care less about what is happening around them in their lifetime. They don't even care to record mundane events and so forth. The quotidian concerns are lost sight of. Why? Because their worldview is cyclic, and since everything will happen again, therefore there is no individuality of an event, and therefore they don't show much interest in recording a particular event, and they just talk about big metaphysical, philosophical things about cosmology and so forth, and don't care to record military details or dynastic details the way they were expecting in the 19th century, because they themselves were writing it that way by the 19th century. Now, this streak reverberates in the writings of many others also. For example, A.B. Keith or Phillips, or even Prabha. So, even some of the Indians, now Prabha is writing in 1970s, and this kind of or you say imperial paint that they gave to ancient India is uncritically lapped up by several Indian scholars as well. But then we have Romila Thapar's response, and also the American historian Steen, who writes about early India, and stands for this fact that there are clear instances of secular, social and political doctrines in Indian sources, like the Arthashastra, which is not otherworldly, but it is very much this worldly. In fact, Arthashastra is there is an accentuated concern about maximizing revenue for the state in Arthashastra, and it was very much an ancient text. So, this otherworldliness of of early Indians is critiqued by these scholars. Romila Thapar, for instance, also that cyclical Hindu worldview finally had cosmological dimensions. Hence, there is a fair bit of a scope for linear historical tangents, and that she talks about Puranic genealogies as an example of this. So, the point being made is that it's one thing to have a world view which is appearing to be cyclical, but it is of cosmological dimension. Cosmological dimension means the canvas is huge. So, you are talking of yugas which runs into several thousands of years and so forth. And even if you think that over a long period of time, in the ultimate analysis it will come back to the same place, or it will keep moving in circular direction, human lifetime is very short with reference to that cosmological canvas. And there are very many references about what is happening in one's lifetime, the experiences and so forth. And when those texts are read, obviously you get instances of linearity. So, things are changing in their lifetime, and that is insulated from cyclic viewpoint. So, there are very many linear tangents that the British did not look at, and simply drubbed it all together as cyclic and hence ahistorical and so forth. Further, she also says that cyclic also appears as some kind of a spiral that never returns to the original. Now, this is interesting that it is one thing to look at things in a cyclic way, but if you look at things in a spiral way, then there is a direction. So, it is spiraling into a particular direction, and when you or think of a spring, right. So, it is moving in cyclical direction, all right, but it is not going back to the point of origin. So, the end point is different from the origin point. So, that spiral kind of analogy is interesting in Thapar's writing, and that accords fair degree of linearity that the British administrative historians failed to recognize or cognize in India's past. Further, she also speaks of embedded and externalized historical consciousness. So, there are quite a few things which are embedded in as historical in an account that will otherwise appear to be philosophical or cosmological and so forth, but within that you have historical consciousness embedded. It could be in some sacrifices to better one's life condition, etc. and so forth. That's a very clear instance of concern with the present, concern with one's mundane life, concern with everything around one's lifetime and so forth. And then there are externalized historical consciousness like the Puranic genealogies, or what is mentioned in several rock edicts or inscriptional sources, etc. So, that is very evident. Externalized means you have genealogy. So, my father, my grandfather, and the father of my grandfather, and so you are ultimately linking it to some Chandravansh or Suryavansh in order to legitimize your present political situation and so forth, where you are trying to seek some kind of a legitimacy from a very exalted or very glorious past, which is or maybe some kind of a golden age past and so forth. So, that is something that we need to be aware of. Then this issue of mythologization. So, this is when you present things studied with mythology. So, it comes trapped in mythology. Historical details come trapped in mythologies, but you should not merely look at the outer coverage of myths and superhuman character of it and reject it altogether, because embedded in it is something which is very historical. So, in panegyric biographies of rulers usually projected it to the golden age of mythical heroes. Now, this is a tendency, right. So, if a historian in 19th century is looking at it, they will say that, okay, well, this does not seem to be very exact, this is all about myths and this is fantasy and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that they are doing, I mean, these biographers or poets, court poets are presenting the genealogies of their king in mythical way, ultimately linking it to some kind of a golden age from which their ancestors came, or from where their ancestors came and so forth. Now, this is politics, this is direct search for legitimacy, which is very political. Right. So, this is very mundane, this is how statecraft goes. Every ruler will require such sources of legitimacy from past, and that is precisely what they are doing. Hence, an effort towards seeking or consolidating legitimacy, and therefore, this is very real. So, there is some kind of an instrumental use of mythology to affirm something which is very real, which is very mundane. And so, this tendency of mythologization is something which is very historical, which is very real, and it has covert concern to negotiate with the present. And this is something that you can get in the writings of Steen as well. Many more chronicles may have been extant earlier than those that have fallen prey to the political climate and intrigue of the time. So, that is known as conspiracy theory that Steen talks of, that several court poets might not have brought out the genealogies and historical documents that they were aware of, and Kalhans Raj Tarangani digs into that, and that is why it is important. So, and they did not bring that into limelight because of the politics, because of legitimacy issue, because of the service that they were doing of their rulers, because that could have compromised with the legitimacy source of their rulers and so forth. So, the point is that there is a fair degree of concern with the mundane and the present and the real, and they come embedded in what from outer veneer looks like a mythological engagement with past or a cosmological engagement with past, but at the root of it is something very real, something very solid, something very historical.